As the scientific revolution and enlightenment took hold of Europe in the 17th and 18th century, new, modern ideas were spread across the continent. As a result of these changing ideals and an increased effort to promote literacy and education between the 1600s and 1800s, literacy rates sharply increased. Women during that time period also became increasingly literate.
As literacy rates improved, the amount of literature being published increased. Despite the new secular concepts of the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution, the Bible still remained a popular read, especially in Protestant countries. Branching off of the religious zeal, pamphlets called chapbooks were created. These held Bible stories, prayers, devotions, and biographies of saints. Following as a close favorite in Europe were books that provided entertainment. Fairy tales, medieval romances, true crime, and adventure were favored stories, each providing their own wisdom. The third genre that people enjoyed were the more practical books, such as instructional nonfiction on how to perform a certain craft properly, or how to do some household repair. Most of the lore in Europe was stored in almanacs. Almanacs were accepted by all classes and provided a way for elites to still be connected to the common folk.
It may be true that the common people did not read the works of the Enlightenment, but they were not completely ignorant to the spread of its philosophies, and they contributed to its enlightenment ideals. The working class gained knowledge of the Enlightenment through gossip on the streets and debates in coffee shops and local taverns. Thomas Paine, the son of an English corsair, was the author of Common Sense, one of the most influential texts of the American Revolution.
Although the spread of literacy was wide and far, the communication of ideas, such as stories, among peasants continued to be oral rather than written. Women enjoyed gathering in their friends' cottages to sew and tell stories, and occasionally young men could be invited so that women could decide whether or not they were good suitors. The common activity for men was to drink and talk with friends in public places. As one traveled to towns and cities, there was a wider variety of activities. There were gardens, theaters, libraries, fairs, and sports. Blood sports were also popular events in the 18th century. These included bull baiting and cockfighting, that included violence and bloodshed on animals. Popular recreation and religious celebration continued to create various festivals and processions throughout the year known as carnivals. Carnivals gave people a chance to let out their frustrations before returning to the usual social hierarchy and work.
Not only was literature and recreation changing, but thanks to the colonial settlements in the New World, dietary habits were changing as well. At the start of the 18th century, common folk relied on grain just as much as they did in past years. Peasants needed to buy grain for bread, and they believed in just price, the idea that the price should be fair, protecting both consumers and producers. When prices rose, bread riots broke out.
Vegetables, primarily peas and beans, were found on the plates of peasants year-round. Fruits were harder to come by, and their consumption was limited to the summer months. Milk, too valuable to drink, was used for cheese and butter. Meat was eaten less in the 1700s due to laws preventing folks from hunting game. However, these laws were often broken. Traders and merchants ate less monotonous food. Markets provided a different variety of fruits and vegetables, though bread and beans were still the main dish. And as always, the upper class had the most elaborate diets of them all, eating anything from succulent meats to delicious sweets.
As the century progressed, corn, squash, tomatoes, and potatoes provided new food sources for Europeans, especially the potato, which had more vitamins and carbohydrates. Tropical foods from Portugal and West Indies began to appear in the markets, but these were more expensive commodities. The most popular goods were tea and sugar, and no other product sold as much. This was because of the rapidly paced work industry in Europe that formed need for stimulants amongst the working class. The more people who used products from the New World, the more dependent they became upon these products, thus linking them in a global trade network beyond their ability to shape or control. The wide-ranging growth in consumption and new attitudes towards consumer goods in the cities of Western Europe in the second half of the 18th century was considered the Consumer Revolution. The result of this revolution was a society in which self-identity was expressed through the goods people consumed. Goods poured in from the colonies, giving people the choice to pick and choose the goods they desired.
Whereas fashion had previously been a part of life open only to the upper class, during the 18th century, during the Consumer Revolution, common people gained the ability to express themselves through clothing. Entrepreneurs worked to create a higher demand for clothing through strategic advertising, and the increasing number of women entering the textile industry made these goods cheaper.
As the consumer revolution progressed, a society in which an individual's self-worth was judged by the goods he or she consumed developed, which was a characteristic of modern Western life. The economic developments of the 18th century gave way to the emergence of the full consumer society.
Open Gangnam Style.